So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first panel discussion of Global Cleveland's inaugural International Women's Month celebration. My name is Rosrita DeMillo, and I currently serve as a graduate fellow for Global Cleveland. Our organization recognizes the incredible impact that international individuals have on our Cleveland community. From CEOs to healthcare workers, nonprofit directors to stay-at-home parents, international women are essential. Through our daily features, business highlights, and 3 panel discussions this month, we hope to remind our community that international women, women identifying, trans women, and non-binary folks deserve to be cherished, listened to, and celebrated. Thank you all for attending this panel. Today, we will speak on the impact that culture plays on menstruation. The amazing women speaking on this discussion will address barriers to success faced by individuals who menstruate and how we as a community, a society, and as individuals can work toward menstrual equity. Go ahead, Ms. Brinson.
Good evening. My name is Sandra Brinson, and I am the chairman of Alpha Omega Foundation Incorporated. Together with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, we are supportive and giving back to the community in the greater Cleveland area. The Alpha Omega Foundation is committed to ensuring immigrant girls and women to have access to safe products to support them as they transition here into their new culture and home. Having a global influence on the women's health is significant to the foundation and at the core of its work. The Alpha Omega Foundation hopes to ensure the synergy built with the global Cleveland area and the support that the Alpha Omega Foundation will provide to many women and girls on our Global Impact Day. For the Period Project is the first of many. This year, we will adopt the program, and our philanthropic foundation will help support to get the products that will help the organization. Thank you for allowing the foundation to support you in this work. There is one more thing that I would like to share with you coming up in September. Saturday, September 11th, 2021, from 10 o'clock a.m. to 1:30 p.m., we will have a Sankofa workshop where we will be sharing skills for women that are transitioning out of foster care, experiencing homelessness, and are refugees or immigrants. That is the target that we will be targeting. And we will be working on job skills and other resources that will help them as they grow into their new communities and their new life. So I would like to thank you for inviting us. I thank you for sharing your organization with us so that we can bond and do something for women in the Period Project.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brinson. And now Avery will start our panel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Avery Ozimek. My pronouns are she, and her, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. By day, I am an employee benefits compliance attorney, but in my spare time, I'm a committed reproductive justice advocate and have worked for organizations like If When How, Lawyering for Reproductive Justice, and the Freedom Center Journal. Right now, I sit as the vice chair of a Cincinnati-based volunteer-led organization called Proud Partners of Planned Parenthood Southwest Ohio. I'm so excited to be here to learn alongside all of those in the audience listening today. All of our panelists today use pronouns she and her. Shruti Gautam is a strong advocate for menstrual equity and has worked on numerous legislative research and grant-based initiatives regarding the topic through her position as International Youth Advisory Council for Period, a nonprofit working to combat period poverty. Shruti started and runs period equity initiatives in her city and state, getting free products in her school district. Samiha Khan has dedicated her efforts to eradicate period poverty at both a domestic and international level. Samiha is involved with period.org on their youth advocacy council and works for philanthropic organizations, Grantmakers for Girls of Color, and the nonprofit Heart to Grow. Clara Garcia Ortez is the CEO and co-founder of Be Artsy, a small NGO founded in 2016 to provide communities with tools to improve communication and spaces to open to critical reflection. Clara has been working in Nepal since 2017 with the Rato Baltan Project, which means Red Bucket Project, to help educate girls and boys in schools, as well as women's and men's groups on safe menstrual health management, sexual education, and fight chowpatty, a tradition that considers people impure while menstruating. Raven Carter serves in the form of massage therapy, doula work, and holistic care. Her organization, The Womb Wing, captures her passion to serve the feminine spirit. Through educational discussions, shared personal stories, and supportive practices for your yoni, Raven creates a sacred space to nourish womb wellness and nurture wild women. Brittany Gray is the founder of Girls Health Period, a nonprofit organization that provides menstrual products and underwear to schools to eliminate absenteeism. Girls Health Period serves students from second grade to college with over 35 educational partners and 3 public locations. Dr. Huda Afana is a Michigan native who joined the Cleveland Clinic Foundation Women's Health Institute as an obstetrics and gynecology physician in 2020. She graduated from Michigan State University College of Human Medicine and Hurley Medicine Center. She is passionate about all aspects of women's healthcare and underserved medicine. She looks forward to continuing her career in Cleveland. So now, as we start this discussion, I thought it would be great to lead with a conversation around the last year and how 2020 and COVID has really impacted and created barriers for folks who menstruate. We've seen new challenges arise and existing challenges become illuminated. And I think the 2 areas that we've seen this most is healthcare and education, of which we have several experts on the panel to discuss those topics. I thought we could first talk about healthcare and the past year and menstruation, and start with Huda and Raven on that topic.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for my introduction. It's so interesting reflecting on healthcare now that we've hit the 1-year milestone, because I just feel like there's so much that has changed as opposed to what has stayed the same. And I do think that in terms of women's healthcare, a lot of aspects have changed. Because when I think of women and women who menstruate, menstruation is a major topic of discussion, but women's healthcare really encompasses holistic well-being. And one area that I can still reflect on past the 1-year mark is that mental health and physical well-being has been severed by the pandemic. So I really feel that sort of causes a central issue and can exacerbate any difficulties with menstruation. That would be my reflection 1 year out. And I remember from the early months of the pandemic, one of the challenges that we faced as women healthcare providers is really deciding what takes priority. And the truth is, so many things in women's healthcare takes priority, but it was a balance of addressing women's healthcare needs and keeping patients safe and away from the medical system unless it's necessary. But that opens up the complexity of women's healthcare, and really, I think, brought the attention to what is important, what is a priority, and what aspects of women's healthcare need our attention, pandemic or not.
I think that's interesting, talking about prioritizing different aspects of menstruating folks' life. I know in conversations with Raven, we talked about how, babies continue to come and her doula work. Raven, if you want to touch on that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, by the way, too. And I'm really happy to be here speaking on a panel tonight. In terms of healthcare, 2020, the pandemic definitely showed us all, I think, the brilliant phase that we're all in when it comes to like getting our needs met in the healthcare society and system. I would say as a doula, we were kind of put in this position to not be in the room as an aid of support. And I know in terms of birthing, which is just as natural as menstruation, that caused, I would say, more of the emotional and mental complexities that I would say Huda spoke on. These things happen so naturally, and I don't think we realized the necessary need for support until we were in something like the pandemic. So that's what I will add.
Have either of you or anyone on the panel found creative ways in which you're supporting those folks in the healthcare system?
One thing that has helped, I think, is just the simple application of FaceTime, like just having someone on a video call. I think both in the offices and I would say less so in the birthing suite, but even so, like I've seen patients call their families once the birth, happened, and just try to create more of that atmosphere that patient is accustomed to and expecting, because a lot of our patients that have delivered were pregnant prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, just being an anchor of support, just being there where you can be. I will say the one thing about 2020 is I realized there's so many virtual avenues. So even though there is this in-person presence that was lost, I would say the virtual world has been very paramount and at least aiding in the connections and navigation in the system.
Right. Even being here today on this panel is a product of 2021 and the use of technology. So connecting all of us across the globe even. So I guess we can transition a little bit, unless there's anything to add to kind of the educational aspects of it. We have two students on the panel who I think can bring a really unique perspective. I think one that particularly adults and adults that don't have children don't often get to hear, and how that's impacting students who are menstruating. So Shruti or Samiha.
I can go first then. So I think a lot of the work that Samia and I probably both do is just a youth-focused impact on a lot of these issues, because sometimes those types of voices and those types of experiences get lost when you are looking at the whole picture. And Clara does a lot of work with this as well, but for us, I think it's firsthand too in schools, kind of seeing that there are a lot of people who would be a lot more comfortable if they did have access to these products, or people that will go out of their way of trying to get something from someone who's in class, or use other alternatives because they don't know where to go, or they don't feel comfortable going somewhere else. And I think a lot from that comes again with just like improper sex education and just lack of support too, because people don't want to talk about those issues. And because of that, people really get impacted during school, at least. And it just doesn't seem right for someone to not be able to get an education as well as they'd like because of a bodily process that they can't control. And a lot of those factors do come into play. And I think as a student, you don't even realize that it's something that's wrong until you continuously see it happen. Because if it's sometimes that it's happening for you, it's the same expectations that you see anywhere, like, oh, it's just how it is. But when you're in a school and you're seeing a lot of people go through the same things, I think it just kind of starts to click. And it makes you realize maybe this isn't the best way that we could go about this, or the best way as a society we treat it. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think after Samiha speaks, I think Brittany can address a lot of the things that you're talking about also with absenteeism and how to get access for those folks who are having those experiences also.
Yeah, I'd really like to echo Shruti on that. I think the one thing 2020 and the coronavirus pandemic has shown us, especially in like period poverty work, is how essential those products are. So many times public facilities are places where people are able to access products for free if they are living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford to, spend a lot of money on tampons. And when those public facilities are closed, you see a lot of people struggling to access products. I've talked to girls on college campuses who are trying to make every single pad count and their pads stretch, which is absolutely almost horrifying to me. The fact that, every single pad that they use in their mind is another dollar going away from, putting food on the table. I think one thing that it also has highlighted for me is the importance of sustainability efforts. Every single month we menstruate. And so there's almost like this endless need for pads and tampons. But stuff like menstrual underwear and cups, I think, and the education that is necessary to go along with those products. But those products can really help women who need a reoccurring access to menstrual hygiene products.
And have either of you seen, like, amongst your peers, a change in how people are getting those products? Was school a place that they typically got those? As someone who is quite far removed from high school, I went to school at a time when period products would have never been in our schools, in our bathrooms or anything.
I think for me at least, it's usually you got products when you're mostly from home and things around that. But with the new availability in schools, it's being used. It's not like people are just taking them or stacking them, or they're not being used, that they're being used. And it's directly linked with the amount of people that are going to the nurses or not now, or just we can tell that people have been using the school as a source now when you put the products in the bathroom. And we can also tell that this is helping too, because you see more people being comfortable talking about these types of issues. And also just in the bathroom too, it's more ease to try to just get something from in there than go somewhere else when there wasn't that accessibility before. Because even if you have those broken dispensers with no money or anything like that, these types of baskets with products can be such easy resources. But there's always then some schools or some maybe middle schools that don't have as available resources, and people might go to teachers as a last source. But I think people would rather turn to toilet paper than go and ask someone that they're not comfortable talking to before. But yeah.
Brittany or Clara, I know that you work in the supply end of getting products to kids in schools. Have you had to think of creative ways to promote access in your work?
I know for Girls Health Period here in Cincinnati, it literally has been, you think the simplest idea is to place products in the bathroom, but to some administrators in schools, that these are going to be stolen or these are going to be misused improperly, just misused. And at this time, it's just it's a pad. You may have one or the two jokesters wants to do something in the bathroom, but these are actually going to who we need to. So with that said, we created an avenue with teacher advocates, and there are at least 2 to 3 teacher advocates on each floor closest to the bathroom where students can go at any given time. That's during passing in the hallway, or in if they're in the classroom or a bathroom close, they just literally are said, I'm going to Mr. So-and-so's room or this room, and it's already known throughout the school, as within the teachers and administration, that they know that, okay, that's where an advocate is. Wherever you saw our logo, that's where a teacher had menstrual products available right at the door before anything noticing anything. So yes, we want to go the simpler route and have something just in the bathroom to have baskets, but we also see the sanitation in those bathrooms are not at the best too. So we want to make sure that our students, our menstruating students especially, that they are the 3 C's. They're clean, comfortable, and confident. So that is just one thing that we did offer right before COVID hit. And the access has been where we had to transition into where we are sending products, and that includes wipes, um, menstrual products such as pads, tampons, whatever they wanted to have, because you also have a choice on what product you want to have, and underwear any size to your doorstep. So, and that's with your family. I don't ask any questions about how many people need it in your household, because you could have 4 menstruators or not, or more, or just you. So it's whatever the student needs to have a properly clean menstruating menstrual cycle.
And how do they reach out to you now that students, at least in the Cincinnati area, are still doing digital schooling?
So they literally can go on our website. That's at girlshealthperiod.org, and they can request a donation. They get the donation sent to them. It's priority mail. So it's about 2 to 3 days sent out. And that's not just students in Cincinnati. We've sent to Alabama, Florida, other parts of Ohio, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. So it's whoever needs it. Our mission is to end absenteeism. And since schools were in, remote, we want to make sure that our students can still feel well enough and feel centered enough that their menstrual cycle is something that is one thing off their plate, even being present in a remote classroom.
That's awesome. I think that's a really great way to be creative during these non-typical COVID times we're in.
Okay, in our case, thank you for having me here, by the way. In our case, we are doing menstrual cup distribution since 2017 in remote parts of West Nepal, in places that usually girls don't have any other recollection system for the menstrual flow. And for example, during the COVID-19 situation, it was super good that from the beginning we have started to hire for working in the project local girls. Our local students, so the all menstrual cup users are the new trainers, are the new mentors. So during the COVID-19 situation, we could continue with our work when it was safe to go outside and it was not locked down, because all our trainers were in the small villages, and all them had menstrual cups around and could continue doing the menstrual cup training. That was, if we could not, it would be impossible to continue with the work during 2020, and we were able to do it because of that.
That's awesome. I think menstrual cups are often forgot about, although it's great to hear. I have more and more people in my life using them, so they're important for eco reasons too, like Samiha brought up. Because access is so important, like we're talking about, has anyone, I guess this is an open question, seen legislation or advocated at a legislative level for access in schools or in other areas? I know that Samiha and Shruti mentioned that they did legislative work.
I can start off then with that, but at least for me, I know a lot of it was local level, going to my local representative and then taking that to the state. So we pushed for a bill for products in the Missouri State Legislature, and my own House representative for my county pushed that and filed that and refiled it for this session in two versions, two with like different financial proposals with them. But also there's a lot happening in the US as a whole, and other countries as well, I know have different legal status. Like I'm sure Clara could tell later too, like in Nepal, even though chopathy is illegal, I mean, technically people still practice it. And so legal statuses don't really mean, it depends on the weight that it has. But as for policy initiatives here, a lot of ground can come from trying to at least make things available, even if you can't get rid of the stigma. And so some of the work that I've been doing with some people over at Period, the organization, is just trying to get data on who's affected, how many people are affected, and using it in a way to help people who are pushing policy proposals, because there's almost like no research on how many people or who is being affected. So, but that's kind of where I come from. Yeah.
It's interesting thinking about what is legal impacts versus cultural impacts, and how different cultures, even within the same country, have impacts on how menstruation is viewed. I don't know if anyone wants to touch on that, or their lived experience or experiences they have as advocates and change makers.
I know for a lot of our students, just increasing of a melting pot in some cultures, that I had a younger student that was actually menstruating through her pregnancy, but she didn't know that even through the pregnancy that you have a menstrual cycle, but her father is the one that got menstrual products. And so in that household, it was already a dynamic anyway that she was pregnant, but that the fact that she's menstruating through that and the products. And so he thought he didn't have to buy any more products because she was pregnant. And I'm like, we still have to continue to do this. And in certain cultures, it's not spoke about. Even if you talked about tampons or menstrual cups, there's some products that we don't even touch, or students don't even talk about, or even want to think about, because that means that there has to be something touching their genitals, something. It just gets out into a whole cultural, just years of worth of just lack of actual knowledge of what's going on, and what actually it can be very eco-friendly and positive toward the body in general. But that is just something that is culturally handed down. And then sometimes it's religious speaking about certain products that you're going to use, certain products you're not going to use, and just something during even menstruation through a pregnancy that in certain cultures they didn't even think that they still needed menstrual products for.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to think that, particularly in Western cultures, that we've moved past this idea that menstruation is unpure or dirty in some way. I think about books that I've read in the biblical times where they treat it as something unpure. And we forget that, it's easy to forget that that still exists out there. The chowpatty is a great example of that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Clara?
Yes, because it's really important that people know that
Yeah.
that still exists. Okay. In Nepal, women are considered impure while menstruating. But in West Nepal, in the part more west of the country, not only are considered impure, if not, they are not allowed to enter in their house. They are not allowed to touch family members. They cannot touch the main sources of water, the water taps. They cannot touch, for example, trees because they think that trees are going to die. They cannot drink milk because the cows or the buffaloes are going to die. So women have to stay outside the house during day and during night. They cannot enter to the kitchen. No one is going to eat if a menstruating woman cooks something. And they have to sleep in small huts or sheets outside. That make that, for example, and they have to wash every day everything that they touch because it's impure. That make, for example, that during winter, they have their blanket wet when it's night, and they have to sleep with the wet clothes. So they die because of hypothermia. They have a lot of pulmonary problems. They make small fires and die because asphyxia, get burned, literally. It's really awful. In summer, there is snakes and other wild animals, and nobody knows how many girls are getting raped because in a Hindu culture, no one girl, if is getting raped, will tell because if not, cannot be get married. So it's really is taking all the dignity for the woman, telling you are impure, stay outside, work, that yes, but don't do anything more. No? It's really, really a tough thing. And we have been working since 2017. We use the menstrual cup because we were thinking that, so if blood don't get outside, maybe they feel clean, they feel poor, because when you take your menstrual cup, you see that the blood is not smelling, the blood is clean. So that is changing things. We are never telling the ladies, the girls, the men, don't do chowpadi. We have to respect, it's a cultural tradition. We cannot do anything more than educate boys and girls, men and women, and with the help of the menstrual cup, it's really helping. But it's really difficult to think that.
Yeah. So do you take a science-based approach to education, or what approach do you take when trying to combat these ideas that menstruation is somehow unclean or impure?
Yes, we take a really natural, really science way to explain, but we explain in a way that they feel really touched. No, for example, because we explain women 45 years old what is their menstruation. They don't know, so we explain that menstruation is the room for the baby. That woman, we prepare every month the room for the baby, the food for the baby. Is no baby, the room get out, and women start to prepare again the room for the baby. That makes them to change totally the division, no? Because we explain the baby is a baby that will be the room, is all the nutrition things, it will come for that room. So what get with the menstruation out is something totally opposite as impure. No, it will be the food and the room for your baby, no, and that make a really big change in their mind.
That's a really interesting approach, and I think that would work cross-culturally even. It's something so personal to every person who's trying to start a family or not. So, and as Brittany touched on, these are ideas, maybe not chowpudry exactly, but ideas that are held here in Western countries also. Huda Raven, from a healthcare perspective, do you see cultural norms or ideas impacting the way doctors interact with patients or holistic healers interact with patients?
I think the interesting thing about, for me, or an interesting experience about choosing a career in women's health is I can only speak from my own experience, so I can't encompass everyone's who shares the same cultural background as me, but I grew up believing that menstruation should be a very secretive thing. And it's only until I started my career years ago, where basically there are much different variations in the experience of menstruation, and you have a very personal experience with your, I suppose, like what defines your womanhood. But when you're growing up, it's a secretive thing, but it also is a milestone to womanhood. So when you get your first period, you're officially a woman. And I think there's so much more to that. And also, in like cultivating an environment in an office setting where I talk about issues of menstruation or personal concerns, that can be pretty overwhelming for patients, because we've grown up in a society that essentially says that it should be a secretive thing. So enabling someone to talk about it can be a challenge. And then also establishing that trust, because talking about how the pandemic has changed healthcare, wearing a mask, you can hardly see my facial expressions, and that has changed the interactions that I have with people on a daily basis, unless of course I am doing virtual visits, which don't necessarily work for women's health. It is great to have as an alternative for certain issues, but a lot of our one-on-one conversations are in person. So the way I have to create an environment where someone feels comfortable coming forth with their concerns is a completely contrast from growing up in a society that says it should be secretive and don't talk about it, and there's some taboo, there's some stigma to it, and then going into an area of healthcare where it's like a very open conversation, and that entails menstruation, sexual health, relationships in general, and fertility for that matter. So it kind of encompasses all areas of women's health, but specifically menstruation. I have seen the cultural influence, and you may think that, okay, if I have someone in front of me that shares the same culture, then we'd automatically have this level of understanding. But I found myself a little more nervous, or I feel like I don't want this person or this individual in front of me to feel that I have the same biases or I have those same viewpoints. So it's sort of like, what type of bias or what type of hurdle did this individual grow up with that may be different than my own, despite that we share that same culture?
Have you found like the work that you are doing, because it has been so foreign to that cultural background that you grew up with, has your work now informed how you talk about these topics with family members or friends? And how have you tried to encourage others to be converse more openly about that?
I think what's really unique about practice right now is that because of the COVID pandemic, we don't allow visitors to accompany the patient in the room. So it truly is a one-on-one experience. But for some of my adolescent and younger patients, I will have a mother in the room. And it can be tricky. I think that there is no rule book or script that you can say to automatically be on the same page with everyone. And you kind of have to read the room. And typically it's a team effort when a mother presents with her child, but you also want to give the adolescent or the younger individual some autonomy. So you essentially do part of the visit in private, so without the other adult present. But the truth is, I don't feel that we have enabled like a ability to involve other family members or partners until it turns into a goal, like obtaining a pregnancy, like becoming pregnant.
Thank you. Raven, your work with your yoni practice and your doula work, have you seen any cultural impacts in the way you interact with your, do you call them patients, the folks you work with?
Well, I will say this. I refer to all of everyone I work with as a client. It's, I don't know, it's like patient just kind of leaves us feel like we're like going to do something that's like
All.
out of the ordinary, and I just feel like pregnancy is just like, it's just like, yes, this happens. Like, you know.
Interesting. I love that approach.
Yeah. So I will say this. It's I will say stepping into more of the womb work and in a more recent year, I realized like the conversation is very gentle and delicate. And it is so it's like very interpersonal is what I'm realizing. Like the best way to almost have the conversation is to establish comfortability, and to make it open, to hear their story. Even as a doula, I've learned like I tell my clients all the time, like, it's not my pregnancy, you know, it's not my experience. Like, I'm really here to support and hold space, and to let things authentically unravel, because I think due to the fact that this conversation is very touchy, and I wouldn't even say just in our culture, I would say across cultures, it's one where it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, like it happens, like here's your care package of what to do each month, like good luck. So it's almost like you kind of have to meet the person face to face, and heart to heart, to almost like hear their story, to see like where you can advocate, where's the support needed, and also be open to learning something new.
Absolutely. I think we've talked about barriers quite a bit. And have you, Raven, seen any barriers to the type of work that you're doing, whether that's cultural or economic? I think of people who have doulas and where you first hear about that. And I think of like celebrities who bring doulas into the birthing room with them or something like that. So can you just talk on the barriers, economic or cultural, that impact the work you do, and maybe how you're working to overcome those barriers?
Yeah, I would say more of the barriers lie in the ability of access, and educational resources. Like I would say it's what is a doula in defining that, and also having it be accessible in the birthing community, is not necessarily an option, but as a need, and showcasing that work. I would say there in Cleveland, the beautiful thing is we do have a lot of doula support communities. Birthing Beautiful community is like literally right in the Huff area. And they really showcase to be of advocacy to provide doula care for people that probably wouldn't have that access or knowledge. And so I really try to like be in networks and neighborhoods like that, where it's needed. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And then I guess as before we go into a Q&A with audience members, I thought we could just talk about one final question, how we, the audience as everyday individuals, can live up to this International Women's Day and Month theme that Global Cleveland has given us to choose to challenge. And what can I and our audience do as individuals to aid in this fight for menstrual justice, or menstrual equity, without being experts like all of you are, without working in this boots on the ground every day? How can we contribute? I can open this up to whoever wants to go first, or I can call on people, either way.
Being an advocate, that's for free. And I know we're on Instagram and Facebook, and being able to share our message throughout. It just one click, one share, one post to save. But not only that, like I was telling the panel before we got on here, is that I talk about going in your backyard. There's a neighbor of yours, especially during the COVID times. If you haven't figured out your neighborhood by now, then you got to get out. We got to get out for you to really see your neighborhood. And next door, somebody is in need. It's in need of something. It may be just sugar in the beginning, but before you know it, you may need a pad, you may need blankets, you may need water. And that's how we work as a community. And that community builds as a family. So creating that trust factor and even in your house, in your family. There's a lot of communication that we don't do that is our basic needs. Mother, father, sister, brother, however you want to take it. So if you start there, you develop so much more in understanding the need of the person next to you and giving an open area where they feel comfortable coming into the space and being able to be vulnerable. Because this, accessing getting access to this can be a vulnerability for some. And so creating an open area for that is where you really want to start with too.
Yeah, talk about grassroots. Neighbor connections is about as grassroots as it gets.
I'd love to add to that. I think beyond need, we can really challenge the stigma that menstruation holds in our daily lives, with our families, with our neighbors. We can stop, referring to your menstrual experience as, that time of the month, and really using direct language, and stop hiding, the bloody sheets, and, stop keeping it a secret. If you're a parent, really talking to your kids early about what menstruation is, regardless of gender, and in addressing the cultural biases in your own cultures, and then also in Western society, seen in legislation, and just really being really open about it, I think, is the best way to combat that stigmatization. And then in organizing, and in education and healthcare, just really understanding that menstruation is not a monolithic experience, as I know we've kind of talked about here, and doing that research and understanding menstruation from people who menstruate, rather than from legislators who talk about this as more of an issue, rather than menstruation as like a normal experience.
Yeah, I think as people growing up in societies where menstruation isn't super normalized, I know myself and most of the menstruating people I know have like the period underwear that we don't want to show to people. So I think that goes along with the period sheets and not being embarrassed of those, but that those are just a part of being a person who menstruates. So that hit very close to home for me. Thanks for that.
I guess my role would be to not assume someone's attitudes or perceptions of menstruation from just being someone who menstruates, and remembering that there are different sentiments related to the actual act of menstruation. So kind of on the other hand, one thing that I'm involved in is contraception and birth control. And it seems like a lot of options that are really effective and really helpful will make your menstrual pattern not a monthly cycle, become a little more unpredictable or absent. And I think a lot of people are still very uncomfortable with that. And some people believe in that natural process too. So despite all of the external forces, I do think deep down, a lot of us know that it's a natural process and value it and hold it sacred on some level, despite the other benefits of contraception, of course.
Yes. For example, when I started in Nepal, when I started to try to find a project manager, and I started to talk about menstruation so openly, the first people that I was talking, they were looking at me like, that woman is crazy. She's speaking with me about menstruation, no? And that we started the project. We went to the villages. We teach boys and girls in classroom. We do the woman group, and we were trying always to do a men group. And for example, it was super difficult, okay? But for example, we saw that at 7 a.m., a group of men were in some place drinking tea. So we were thinking, okay, let's try, no? We were thinking, okay, that we are here doing a small training. We would like to show you one film and have a chat and a tea. what day and what time is okay for you? And they were telling us, tomorrow at that time is perfect. Yes. Next day, we prepare tea for everybody, nobody. Okay, no one man come. That was our first first time that we tried to do. From this moment, all our trainers, all our mentors go with 2 menstrual cups in the pocket. So when the men come and what are you doing here? Boom. We are doing that. Men take the menstrual cups. Wait, what is that? That is a menstrual cup. What? No, but they have already in their hands. So because they have and it's clean, they start to listen. And what we do right now is, okay, if they don't come to us, we come to them, but we bring that conversation of menstruation so many places that we can. No? We do a men's group now also, but we keep with that. Girls with 2 cups in the pocket, and with somebody else, what are you doing here? Plum, menstrual cups. It's working really well.
Yeah, so including non-menstruating folks in these conversations is a good way to.
Necessary. They are the one that they make the laws. In Nepal,
Yep.
patriarchy is super strong, so necessary to include them.
Absolutely. Shruti or Raven, do you have anything to add as takeaways for just individual folks who want to advocate in some way for menstrual equity?
I guess I would add that a lot of times when you're starting off, you want to try to start small and try to push for something that's achievable, even if it's not as inclusive as possible. I know a lot of people might like push for straight going, oh, let's only do like girls' bathrooms only at a couple high schools because they think it's achievable. But it's honestly better to try to go with the most inclusive option first and go with that instead of what you think is achievable, because oftentimes there's not as much of a difference when you're working towards it. And it also just makes it so that from the beginning you have your values and priorities set. And I think I've seen like a lot of groups and a lot of individuals that have changed their perspective on these issues a lot because of what they think will work for them and work for how they can advocate for things. But honestly, like the more you try to avoid like the actual topics that there are people who don't look like what media deems as normal menstruators, but they still menstruate. And if you accept it, then that's going to, I mean, in the future, at least, it's going to help you out so much more accepting it from the beginning and working your advocacy from that point. Because it's much harder to become inclusive later on when you've already done damage to people. So that's where I would come from.
Yeah, I was gonna say to just start with the conversation, like really keep the conversation fluid and open in the community that you're serving. I know for myself in the womb wing, every week I try to do something called a red tent, which is literally to hold space for women that are bleeding. And like, you know, to not be fazed by the fact some of us don't just bleed for 4 to 5 days. Some of us are bleeding. And so for me, it's like having that anchor of support and having an understanding, but also like not like this is like normalizing the conversation, like literally normalizing the conversation, because I see bleeding happening as long as there are people with wombs. So yeah, normalizing and holding space.
I love the reclamation of that historical concept of the red tent. That's really great that you hold that space for people to come and have conversations. If no one else has anything to add, we can go into some Q&A. I know there's one in the chat box right now. So Elizabeth asks, how can we work to support reproductive health education in schools to make boys and men more understanding? Are there good examples you can point to? So I think Clara talked in depth about how she's doing that work in Nepal. I'm not sure if she has anything to add, or if Samiha or Shruti have anything to add, since they are living school every day, or Brittany or Hoda or Raven.
I think what we do in Nepal should be done everywhere. No? Men and boys should learn what is menstruation, should learn the female reproductive system, should learn everything, because with education, everything is more understandable. No? I don't know, Shruti, what do you think? No, how in the schools is going that in high schools?
I know for students, for me it's the acknowledging, or for male students, male identifying students. If they understand that's on their own, but you're going to have to acknowledge that something's going on. And so I definitely, with Clara, I enjoy the fact that plopping menstrual cups in men's hand, because I've done that in barbershops. So I used to have very short cut hair. I used to be in a barbershop every 10 days. And that was actually, they were my first donation to Girls Health Period, because I was speaking so much about menstruation in the chair that, I had a gentleman next to me and saying how gross it was. And I said, that's crazy to say, because I know you have 2 daughters. And I know they're about to start their menstrual cycle. And the face that he got was just so ghostly. So then I said, and I'm going to need $100 from you to support my nonprofit. And he came up off the money really quickly. So because I believe he was just embarrassed and didn't even think of it, because it's not in the forefront. And so that's why I say it's the acknowledgement. When you have acknowledging, that's the first process of understanding that there is, this is a situation. Is it a problem? And in some facts it is, and so this is a blessing on the other side. It's a double-edged sword. And so having that conversation, and I know for Girls Health Period, we offer that for the teachers, because we have counselors that have had issues with speaking about menstruation and reproductive health. So our people are trained, our working board is fully trained with sex education and reproductive health, and menstrual education awareness. And we also speak to principals, teachers as well. If you feel like you have an issue at that level in a public education setting for students who identify however they want to, you need to rethink your job, because in this present day, excuse my wife, but in this present day moment, literally, this is something that this is only going to expand even more as the years come, and the stigma, we pray that, lowers as the time comes around. So.
And I think then off of that too, the entire point of like, it's not at the forefront, but it affects the people around you. I think that's what's lost a lot in like the sex education processes in schools, that even when you have health classes that are co-ed, and then you separate kids for like 1 or 2 units, and it'll be the things that you have sex ed for, that separation in itself is just saying that there are some things that you should know and some things that you shouldn't, instead of treating it as something that everybody should know. Because like any sort of science or any sort of information, it isn't really something that's preserved for just one group of people. It's more like, people who are affected by it. And if you do, and if there are tons of people who are close to you as well, why shouldn't you learn about it as well? And I think those types of questions aren't really things that people who set this curriculum into think of. They immediately go for what's comfortable and what will get them the least questions. But yeah, that's like the idea of how it affects people and they don't even realize that it affects the people that, I mean, their loved ones. That's really important.
So I'd love to like address how we could get this, you know, education for both boys and girls at a young age, the comprehensive sex education that we need. I think the question asked for some examples, and recently, I think maybe like actually not recently, but a few years ago, time just passes so fast. A few years ago, I think New York City actually passed a bill. It was like the bill to empower women through menstrual health education, and it was introducing menstrual health disorders like endometriosis and into sex education. And I think we can go beyond that, but it's just one example of legislation that does accomplish changing sex ed curriculum in schools. As everyone has kind of mentioned, I think the way to reduce the stigma and is through education. And kind of like Clara mentioned, using like a really science-based approach that definitely acknowledges that menstruation is normal, it is healthy, it is vital to, you know, stuff like pregnancy, and doing that for both men and women, or boys and girls, at a young age. And you can, I think, do that by campaigning and lobbying for stuff like this in your own states, but also at a federal level.
I do want to piggyback off of her real quickly, especially when it comes to health standards and Common Core and education, especially for Ohio. In other subjects, there are specific things that has to be like for teachers to have to teach. In health, it's not, it's an umbrella, and it's a kind of like a anything goes. And so that's where we need to get into the specifics also of adding that education and being very specific in what we want to be shed light on in the education system throughout, not just in Ohio, but anywhere, to have those standards met.
I think that's a good note to end on. I know it's a little bit past 7:30. Contacting legislators and boards of education about these issues and adding that specific curriculum. Those are great action steps to take away from this.
And then I just want to pop on again to thank you all so much for listening to our incredible experts share their experience in the fight for menstrual equity. I know that I'm absolutely blown away by everything that you have all discussed today. You are just truly amazing, and I'm so grateful for your participation in this panel. Thank you. And we're just so thankful for all of the people that work for intersectional justice, including you as our audience. I think we talked a lot about how one of the most important places to start is just normalizing the conversation around it. So attending these types of events, having conversations with your family and friends is so important to do. And we just thank you so much. As part of our International Women's Month celebration, we're going to have 2 more panels that are upcoming. One is going to be on gender-based violence, and the next is going to be on LGBTQ+ identities, both within the context of international communities. Please see our website, globalcleveland.org, to register for these panels and to learn about the women that we're featuring daily. Thank you all for your support of Global Cleveland and our entire newcomer community. And we just truly believe that we are strengthening our city by welcoming our world. Thank you all so much and have a great evening.